Hello, and welcome to the Age Guide, Perspectives on the Aging Journey. We are here to be your personal age guide and enhance your quality of life on the road ahead. In this episode, we recognize National Family Caregivers Month and continue our celebration of our 50th anniversary theme, The Great Reconnection, by talking about the unique needs of a very special group of older adults, those caring for children. Some are grandparents, some are aunts, uncles, or even unrelated friends, but they are all caregivers who have found themselves parenting children in their 60s and beyond. Both the older adults and the children benefit from being raised by a loved one. The children benefit from learning from another generation, experience more stability, and the older adults report feeling a sense of purpose and social connection than other older adults. These dedicated kinship caregivers are in need of connections to resources, support, and information. We interview Brianne Hetman about her work to support a comprehensive program that addresses the often complex and multifaceted challenges of relatives raising children. Let's listen in.
Well, today I am here with Brianne Hetman from Senior Services of Will County. Welcome, Brianne. Thanks for being here.
Very excited to be here. Thanks, Gretchen.
And we're going to be talking today about your work with grandparents raising children. So I'm excited to hear about what's been going on in Will County for grandparents raising children. Can you start out by just giving us a little background on what you do for grandparents?
Yeah, absolutely. Senior Services of Will County has been a funded partner of Age Guide for caregiver programming, including a caregiver resource center and a caregiver counseling center. And basically that offers supportive services to grandparents that are raising grandchildren, respite services, gap services, which is additional funding that can help bridge the gap between challenges and things that present themselves economically, counseling services, therapeutic services that in our agency are provided by licensed clinical staff that we contract with specifically with the idea of helping relatives raising children and other resources. And we've had that funding for quite some time and actually identified some years ago that we wanted to invest in caregiver programming in general and specifically grandparents raising grandchildren because we saw growing numbers in Will County and the need established here specifically. So 6 years ago, our program consisted of a half-time-ish person that was case managing how we spent some of our respite dollars and some of the other programmatic activities. And then the rest of the duties for caregiver programming were spread across the entire department. And what we did was make some intentional strategic plans to ensure that we were providing a full service, comprehensive program to individuals here in Will County because we saw this need pretty significantly. And recently, here in 2023, we've had just a flurry of response and interest in, relatives raising children and grandparents raising grandchildren programming and really hearing of some challenges that post-COVID have prioritized themselves as something that we needed to address. So Senior Services, along with Deputy Majority Leader Natalie Manley, who is our representative in our local 98th district, heard some things from some grandparents in our area and some challenges that they were having and started investigating and started navigating what some of those challenges are and how our staff could best serve them. And we found that there were some gaps in those services and we needed to figure out a way to fill them.
Okay.
And it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't, like an offsite of Age Guide or us. It was just, we work with older adults. So we don't have a relationship with, a pediatric health system. We don't have, access and relationships built with, youth behavioral health. Those are just not things that we had
systems,
to do.
Things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And what we found ourselves needing to do is sort of create that. And we really just sort of catapulted from there and made some things happen so that we could start to drive some change and connect all these systems together.
Awesome. So you're picking up on the needs of your community seeing that there's a gap and then trying to figure out how to fill it, even though, as you said, then you're kind of reaching beyond your usual scope of work when you're talking about working with some children. But the relative piece and the caregiver piece, these would be people who are over 60, right, who are raising kids.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask you if you could define a little bit of like, who are we talking about here? They're not necessarily just grandparents, right? They could be other kin or family members. Like how do you refer to them?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Basically, what we've uncovered is that what we saw with grandparents raising grandchildren, but what we also learned about is that there's other folks, aunts, uncles, non-relatives that are like family that are stepping in these particular situations, for a variety of reasons, some that can be catastrophic and traumatic, and others that are just a situation of circumstances where now you have folks that are caregiving for children.
Mm-hmm.
Again, typically not what we caregive for, right? We're caregiving for other adults. So we're talking about, we have specific funding through Age Guide for those that are 55 and older, and we're really focusing on that crowd,
Okay,
and for us in Will County in particular, 55 and older. But our hopes right now, as we're really entering in this first phase of broadening our horizons, are gathering a lot of data, because we know that there's going to be other relatives out there, other folks that are like family that have stepped in, a godparent perhaps, or something else, depending on the family dynamic. And we want to make sure that we're recognizing that there are some unique challenges when the trend that we found in our communities is that folks need some additional support, and that children are not always living with their biological parents.
Right. So do you have a relationship that you're building with the Department of Child and Family Services as well?
Absolutely. And we've been learning more about the Department of Child and Family Services in the state of Illinois every day. We were on a seminar earlier today and heard all about a program that many of us didn't know anything about, that was specifically designed for folks similar to what we're looking to connect, right? And our goal here is not to reinvent, a service. It's really just connecting people and being sort of that anchor to access all of these additional services and point folks in the right direction.
Perfect. And I would imagine if folks are over 55 and they find themselves parenting again, or even for the first time, and they've suddenly got kids, they don't really know who to go to, and their usual resources for people their age aren't necessarily going to be in the know about services for kids.
That's absolutely right. And things have changed so much. I mean, pre-COVID, there were lots of standards as far as education went, and, things about just raising a school-age child. And that's different now. I mean, we don't really have snow days anymore. You have a remote learning day. What's a remote learning day?
And how do I help my kid with that while I'm working?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And how do I navigate that? And, you brought up a good point, Gretchen, too, that there's, when you are of, not an older adult age, a typical childbearing age. I don't really want to use the word typical, but what you would see majority-wise in the population, you can usually tap in a network of folks that can help you navigate things. If you have a question about an IEP, or you have a question about a Chromebook, you can find someone in your peer group that can help you do that. But on older adults, their peer group is different. It's chemically different, right? It's inherently different. So what we noticed was that, we have folks that are asked these questions and their peer group doesn't have the answer. And for social reasons, for other reasons, they don't feel comfortable going to that majority group, like your PTO group, for example, since we're talking about,
the Parent-Teacher Association at school maybe isn't quite the right fit for them.
Isn't right, exactly. So how are they going to get access to some of this information? Just resources, maybe even, to gain a better understanding and education about the particular topic they're looking for.
So how do they find you then? Are these folks usually already connected to you, or are they starting to find you because you've started this program?
I think they're starting to find us because they've heard the buzz. What we realized which was good, was that when our Deputy Majority Leader, Natalie Manley, when she had started hearing some of the feedback from the grandparents and the relatives in her district, she came to us, and fortunately, we already had those folks on our radar. Okay. But then that led us to think, okay, but what about all the other people that aren't in her district in our area here, in Will County, but then also in all other areas of the state? We all kind of function a little bit differently, you know, different dynamics. But here in Will County, and it's funny because I say this all the time, everyone thinks their organization is the special one, the unique one. And I definitely think that about senior services in Will County, because we have Joliet in Will County, which is the third largest city in Illinois. And our dynamics are extremely urban in some areas and then extremely rural in others. And it's just a very interesting service area to serve as comprehensively and coordinated as we would like it to be. So our plan is this program that is sponsored from the state of Illinois will actually start January 1st of 2024. But what we started to do is, you know, having conversations like this with you and, you know, having conversations in the community and really communicating about, if you're a relative raising a child, if you are a grandparent, please connect with us. Please start accessing this information, you know, follow us on socials, you know, get into the YouTube channel, look at some things so that you can start familiarize yourself with some of the aspects of the program. And then should something apply to you, you can figure out those resources. So we're really, you know, envisioning ourselves as sort of being like a Lego, you know, connecting folks together so that they can access these programs that otherwise they just wouldn't be able to.
I love that analogy.
Because it's not in their purview.
It's a great analogy to a Lego. Is really a connector, and it fits with what you're doing of kind of expanding into the younger kids that are being raised by family members. That's awesome. So you said the program is going to be starting in January. Is that what you've already described for us? The services, the resources that you'll be connecting to people to, or do you want to share a little bit more about what that program is?
Absolutely. There's a little bit more too. So as part of that program, what we're trying to do specifically in the first year is just establish a platform and a one-stop shop here, at least in Will County. And the idea of that is that if we establish a model with some really specific framework, then we would like for this particular framework to be able to be replicated in other areas throughout the state, and then autonomized to however they see it best fitting in their particular community. So we are starting with designating a staff person specifically that will sort of be the face of the Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Plus in our area. And then
so anyone have a full-time staff person?
We will, dedicated just specifically to this program. And then the second piece is creating a coalition of those network providers that I was mentioning previously that we don't usually talk to. You know,
excellent.
Do we have someone that is in, you know, the healthcare system? Do we have someone that does birth through 5? Because, you know, anyone that's worked outside of aging, you definitely know that there are certain things that when, you know, a child experiences any kind of trauma or any event that could be perceived as trauma in 0 to 5, it can have a profound impact. So we need to get those folks connected with our aging folks to say, if we have a 3-year-old that has been living with their grandparents for 2 years, we need to put some supportive services around them to make sure that they have all their successes in place and create that sustainability so they can do the best they possibly can. And unfortunately, we know that most relatives raising children and grandparents are, you know, stepping up in these circumstances, a variety of circumstances, but all of them not ideal, because you want these kids to be with a biological parent, but sometimes that's just not able to happen. So we need to put other services in place to do that.
Yes. So these relatives have also been through some trauma if they've suddenly had to step in and take care of a child. So there's also that mental health component to it, as well as the child's mental health. That's true. They say that anytime a child is not with their biological parents for any reason, there's going to be some trauma. So I'm glad that you guys are addressing that. That's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting too, because even prior to, you know, really digging into this particular segment of the population, we had the caregiver programming. And here at Senior Services, we had done, our site hosted several open to the public vaccine clinics. And at one of our vaccine clinics, you know, that was when the vaccine had first come out and you had to come back like, you know, a month later and you had to get your other dose. And one of the individuals that came and received the vaccine was like, is it okay when I come back, I'll have my grandson with me? And we were like, oh yeah, sure. Like, that's fine. Bring him with. Like, if you think that he is okay in this environment, we're okay with it too. And she goes, well, I have him full time. And we said, oh, okay, that's great. Like, have you ever heard about our caregiver program and the resources available? And she goes, I haven't really looked into that. She goes, I have him because of a catastrophic event that happened in their family. And one of his parents is incarcerated and one of them is no longer with us. And I couldn't imagine.
Wow.
I couldn't imagine navigating that. And then she said, these are her words. She said to us, she goes, I have a 10-year-old. I don't know what the heck to do with a 10-year-old. And I thought, I'm a 10-year-old. At that time, I did too. And I go, I don't know what to do with a 10-year-old
right.
either. So
to any of us, but that's a new challenge as you're aging.
Yeah. It is. Right. And so her navigation, right? I mean, I'm sharing her story in its totality, but her navigation was she didn't have childcare for him because it would have been spring break when she came back for her second dose.
Yeah.
So, it was a very practical, conversation, but came out of just, an experience that really changed the whole trajectory of how she's living, the rest of her life for sure. And that grandchild.
Right. And luckily she brought that up to you, so you were able to connect her to these services. So that's how it's perfect that you guys are already a trusted resource in the community. So hopefully you're having contact with these folks and they're going to find out about this new program and these resources that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's our hope, is that, as we launch this program, this is a 3-year pilot, so we can get data, establish connections, and really start to understand this population better and dedicate some time to it. Because we've dedicated staff to providing and implementing services, but not in this particular framework. So we're excited to see what else we uncover, childcare issues or economic issues, or what are those other programs that some of these state systems are currently developing or have developed that we're just not aware of.
Right.
Like, again, aging doesn't really interact with DCFS. So I don't know, maybe the Department of Children and Family Services has programs, and they do. And we need to learn how to bridge those gaps and put a subject matter expert in those areas that can be easily accessible to the grandparents and relatives in our communities.
Yeah, so you guys are going to be learning a lot about, like you said, the education system, child welfare, all of these pieces that these folks need help navigating. I know there's a push, there has been for a while, for kids to have permanency too. So just being cared for by a relative is not really a good long-term solution for a child. So they're trying to push that relatives either get guardianship or even do adoption. And I know those can be some hard conversations for a grandparent who's like, well, this is my grandchild. Why would I adopt my grandchild?
Right.
But then you have to have these permanency conversations. And then there's a whole heck of a lot of paperwork, and there's adoption subsidies and all this stuff to navigate. So if you guys can help people to figure that out, I think that will be really phenomenal. Having been a foster parent myself, I understand the paperwork piece of it. So I know it can be really overwhelming, and they're going to need some help. So I'm so glad you guys are there.
Yeah, and that's the point, is so that they have a trusted person, right?
Right.
We have other programs at Senior Services that really focus on, sure, there's other people, like you could go and Google, a lawyer that, can help you with, adoption paperwork, right? But wouldn't it be quicker, better, easier, faster if you had someone that vetted that for you, and then we could make sure that that provider understood the particular needs of older adults and was also sensitive to how we work with those populations and what we need to sustain success. So let's do that. Let's put us in charge of something, so that when you're in that situation, you're like, you know what, I'm going to call them because they know exactly who I need to speak with, and they've already done the hard work. Like, I don't need to get the free consultation. They've already talked to the person.
Right.
They know, they vetted it, and I'm going to get a good, fair price. All the things that we're concerned about when we engage in goods and services is the same that we're navigating here. But like you said, at a much different level, something that has to do particularly with your family.
Right. So even just helping them think through that whole process and get on board with, wow, I'm going to have to do some permanency thinking for this child. So that's really amazing.
And it, like you said, explain it, right? Because you're like, I'm the grandparent, like I'm a biological relative. Why would I have to explore this? And then it's like, well, here's why, and here's what we learned, and then we can help you, into this process. It's such a good it's a good ear to have, and it's a good opportunity to fact check from a trusted provider.
Hello and welcome to your Medicare Minute. We are here with Val Guzman, our benefit access specialist here at Age Guide. Today, we have a question from Walter in Kankakee County. He wrote in, I'm enrolled in a Medicare Advantage plan, and I'm not sure if I want to keep it or that it's the best plan for me. What can I do?
That is happening with a lot of people, or we get a lot of questions about Medicare Advantage plans. And the good thing is that if you are enrolled in a Medicare Advantage plan before January 1st, you actually have the Medicare Advantage open enrollment period that runs from January 1st to March 31st to still make changes. So even though the general open enrollment period ended in December, you can either change to a different Medicare Advantage plan, or you could even drop it and switch over to original Medicare. And you'll also have the opportunity to sign up for a supplement plan if you like. Comparing these options or making this change can be a big decision. And that's also, again, where connecting with a SHIP counselor or getting some help to make sure that you are making the choice that works best for you or that works with your doctors. A SHIP counselor can help you know what your options are and whether those plans do work for you.
So could you maybe share with us, you don't have to use names or anything because I know that it's confidential, but could you maybe tell us what it's like for a grandparent who's gone through working with you before? I know the full program is not completely up and running yet, but I know you've worked with some folks already.
Oh yeah, and we have in those inspirations, right? Like the one I just mentioned, where it was like, well, we have to do something more or different because we're not capturing, this person for whatever reason. Yeah, we do have grandparents that have been with us for some years. When their granddaughter was younger, when they started with us, she was 7, and now she's in her teens. So she's been with us. They've been with us for a minute, but they're in their late 80s, and I cannot imagine navigating children,
let alone teenagers. Thank you.
Let alone post-COVID teenager. Okay. And also, again, we're talking about, there is a reason that, their biological parents are not here. And more often than not, it's not an ideal circumstance. And so this particular child, she's just the only one in the home with them right now. She has some behavioral health issues that she's navigating, and she also has some physical issues that she's navigating, medical health issues. So those compound the needs of these older adults. That also adds to how they navigate the choices that they make. So here's the case in point. They're in their 80s, so they're on a much fixed income. For the past years, they have had to get after school care for her because they're trying to supplement their already fixed income in their 80s.
They're still working.
And one of them was trying to supplement income because they need additional resources in order to be able to make ends meet. They have made choices at times where they will not fill their medication so they can fill her medication.
Oh man.
They have tried to keep her in like summer school programming and other things because they want to keep her engaged and keep her supported and keep her, in her community and with other children on a regular basis also, because it's not always cool. I mean, if we're being honest, it's not always cool to be the kid in school that lives with your grandma and grandpa. Right. And they don't know about AirPods or anything, it's not always cool. So they're trying to do the things that they think that will best support her. And one of the issues that we had is they couldn't afford the summer program. And it had to be a particular summer program because it met her behavioral health needs, it met her physical needs. And so the choices for them got smaller, and we finally got a spot for them and they couldn't afford it. And we were like, okay, well, we have to figure out how we're going to get the funding for it, right? Well, funding, as you know, Gretchen, comes with very particular parameters. And we couldn't figure it out. And everywhere we went, it was like a barrier. And I'm just going to be honest, we couldn't have it. Like, we could not say no as an organization, and the leadership in that program at the time could not say no to them that she couldn't, go to this 6-week end of summer program because we couldn't fit the puzzle pieces.
Right.
So we paid for that out of senior services funds because
Wow.
we couldn't say no.
Wow.
And we weren't going to put our older adults, the caregivers, in a position where they were going to choose between their own health and safety and then, the health and safety of the child that they're taking care of.
Right. Oh,
that's just
man.
not, yeah.
Good for you.
Right.
So you just stepped into that and you used your general revenue funds, I assume, and
we
put
did
some money out there. Wow.
We did. And I mean, it wasn't a lot of money, but here's the thing. At the end of the day, anyone that's ever worked, in any social service, that when you end the day, you want to know that you did some good. And that was a day where we could not help. We couldn't,
have to do this.
Felt like we exhausted all of our options. So this was the only next thing. Like, we are not going to say no. We just cannot. And if somebody else could sleep at night with saying no to them, that's fine, but we couldn't. And the good thing is this was some years ago, right? So she has continued to, get access to care. She's continued to have supportive services. They have continued to engage with us. They engage in lots of supportive services, but we continue to navigate challenges with them being grandparents and relatives as opposed to being a biological parent.
And trying to find the right mix of resources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And now she's, becoming a teenager and, there's other challenges that come with that. And, it's just an interesting dynamic. And when we've had families that go over a span of a couple years, that's the other part too, is that their needs change. Early childhood needs are different than school age.
True.
School age is different than teenage. And then the cost of raising a child this entire time has just quadrupled,
Right.
Right. And the income coming in for these parents has not.
Right. And the grandparents are also aging and probably changing their own medical needs and their own capabilities and things that they need resources and support for at the same time. So that is a lot.
Yeah. And unfortunately now with them, we've started having conversations about planning, how are we going to plan for her future? And they're not going to be around forever. They've been navigating their own health issues, and how can we support them, physically, mentally, emotionally? Like what else can we do to make sure that they feel confident that they're setting, their granddaughter up for success?
Wow. That is a lot that you guys are helping them navigate. And if you weren't there, that they would just be falling through the cracks. Thank you so much, Brianne. I appreciate you sharing about this important program and sharing your stories about these families.
Yeah, and I hope that once we get the program up and running, we can come back and visit again and talk about what we're learning and the new navigations and some of the exciting programming that we will be able to implement and plan, to bring to not only our region, but all of Illinois.
Yes, let's do that. Let's definitely get you back on here again. We'll give an update. Thank you so much, Brianne. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Age Guide, Perspectives on the Aging Journey. We hope you learned something new on this podcast, because we all have a stake in promoting a high quality of life for people on their aging journey. Age Guide coordinates and administers many services for older adults in northeastern Illinois. We serve DuPage, Grundy, Kane, Kankakee, Kendall, Lake, McHenry, and Will counties. Our specially trained professionals are available to answer questions and connect you with local service providers and resources. If you are interested in these services or want to learn more, go to our website at ageguide.org. Call our offices at 630-293-5990. Please follow our podcast so when we post our monthly podcast, you are notified on your streaming account. Thank you, and we will see you next time on The Age Guide, Perspectives on the Aging Journey.